Good morning, everyone. I'm Nick Smith in for Marky Martin. We have breaking news coming in overnight. First, Poland and NATO allies shoot down multiple Russian drones in its airspace. Poland calling it an act of aggression and an unprecedented moment in NATO history. We're live tracking new responses from NATO countries as U.S. lawmakers warn Vladimir Putin is testing NATO and the U.S. Also breaking overnight, Israel now facing sanctions and limited trade with the European Union. It follows that shocking strike on Hamas leaders in Qatar, carried out with no U.S. knowledge and stopping any hope of a ceasefire or hostage deal. What President Donald Trump told NewsNation about the strike and the growing repercussions Israel faces for its offensive in Gaza. But first, happening today, the president's crackdown on crime is once again focused on the nation's capital. Right now, you're looking live at the White House. President Trump declared Washington, D.C. virtually crime-free on Tuesday. Now, with the federal takeover of the D.C. Police Department set to expire today, Congress will have to decide whether to extend that order. NewsNation's Tom Dempsey has more from Washington. Tom, good morning. What's the likelihood of the D.C. police being under federal control come this time tomorrow?
Hey, Nick, good morning from Washington, D.C. Look, as of this morning, Congress has no plans to extend that federal takeover of the D.C. Police Department. But also important to note that just hours from now on Capitol Hill, the House Oversight Committee will come together to analyze a number of proposals that could literally overhaul the D.C. criminal justice system, including one proposal that would require 60-day congressional review of all D.C. Council legislation. Another calls for lowering the age of eligibility for juveniles to be tried as adults from 16 to 14 for certain violent crimes. President Trump announced that federal takeover of the D.C. Police Department back in August after declaring a public safety emergency. And following that, local police worked alongside federal law enforcement, including with immigration officers. New data from the Department of Justice shows over 2,100 arrests as part of this public safety emergency, including 20 alleged gang members. House Speaker Mike Johnson saying D.C. should serve as an example to other cities.
These mayors in these big blue cities have to ask this question, and I think their voters and the residents and the law-abiding citizens in all these cities should be asking local leadership, how long are you going to put up with this? When are you going to put your foot down and do the right thing?
And on Tuesday night, the president, vice president, and other leaders ate at a seafood restaurant near the White House to promote that takeover and lower crime rates. And Nick, we will also note that if or when this D.C. federal takeover of the police department expires, this will have no impact on the D.C. National Guard patrolling the streets of the nation's capital. That order for those forces was extended to November recently by the Army. Nick?
Tom, a quick question for you, though. How is D.C.'s mayor, Muriel Bowser, and other Democrats responding to the crackdown?
Yeah, that's been a big part of this story, Nick, is that relationship between the D.C. mayor and the federal government. And actually, the White House press secretary came out on Tuesday saying that, and thanking the D.C. mayor for cooperating with the federal government and saying that they may work together more in the future. But Democrats in particular are really zeroing in on how President Trump, they believe, is targeting Democratic-run cities. Take a listen.
He's not talking about crime in Cincinnati or Toledo or Nashville or in other places. He's weaponizing this issue, and that's unfortunate because Democrats believe in safe communities everywhere.
And Nick, in a recent interview with the Washington Post, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser said that cooperating with the federal government during this public safety emergency may have actually helped Congress not extend that federal takeover of the police department. Nick?
Tom Dempsey live in our nation's capital. Tom, thank you so much. As Congress weighs crime options in D.C., the president is using the murder of a Ukrainian refugee in Charlotte to underscore the need for his tough on crime agenda. But at least one North Carolina Republican is warning him against sending troops. Senator Tom Till is telling Notice, quote, it'll be a problem for him if that happens. NewsNation weekend anchor Anna Koyman is in Charlotte this morning. Anna, good morning. No sign that the president will send troops to North Carolina, but he's calling out what he sees as soft on crime policies in Democratic-led Charlotte.
That's right. Good morning, Nick. Good morning to everybody at home. This grisly stabbing murder here in Charlotte, North Carolina of Irina Zarutska has President Donald Trump and Republicans really across the country pointing to what they call soft on crime policies, policies they believe led by Democrats have failed locals, not just here in Charlotte, but across the country. Issues like cashless bail and catch and release often allow violent criminals to be out on the streets after they have also had mental health concerns. The suspect in this case that you see there on your screen, 34-year-old DeCarlos Brown, had 14 prior arrests, but was still able to be out on the streets and allegedly commit this murder. President Trump says it underscores the need for a national crime crackdown. Listen.
We have to respond with force and strength. We have to be vicious just like they are. It's the only thing they understand. 24 of the top 25 most dangerous cities in America are run by Democrat mayors. The people of our country need to insist on protection, safety, law, and order.
And this has Democrats, not just here in Charlotte, but across the country, defending what President Trump calls woke, failed Democratic soft-on-crime policies. Listen.
It's hard to believe House Republicans and Donald Trump on this issue when the first thing he did was pardon 1,500 violent offenders on day one of his administration. And a handful, more than a handful, have already reoffended and committed crimes back home. So it's hard to say, it's hard for us to believe that he actually cares about this issue.
Well, this back and forth and escalation between the two political parties, Nick, really lets you know that this will likely be a major issue, crime anyway, in this national crime crackdown that President Trump is trying to do across the country in the 2026 midterm elections. Now, as for Charlotte, the mayor here actually just won a Democratic primary last night, despite a lot of backlash. Her initial comments following this grisly murder here in the Queen City, critics say showed more empathy toward the suspect than the victim.
Anna, thank you so much. Anna Koyman live in Charlotte. Joining us now is Zach Schoenfeld, courts and legal reporter for TheHill.com, who's been tracking the political and legal battles behind both of these stories. Zach, good morning. I want you to walk our viewers through what the House would do with the D.C.'s authority. What powers get clawed back and what actually stays local?
Hey, good morning, Nick. Well, as Tom just went through a moment ago, it's been interesting the fact that in this markup today, there is not a proposal to extend the emergency that has allowed President Trump to effectively take over the Metropolitan Police Department for more than 30 days. Congress, if they wanted to, they have the authority to extend that. But at least on the markup today, it seems that there are no plans to do so. But instead, there are these roughly dozen other proposals, which are really in all sorts of areas related to criminal justice. Everything from cashless bail to what is perhaps the most notable one. And that is a bill that would block D.C. voters from electing their own D.C. Attorney General. Instead, it would give that authority to the president. And that could be a big deal. Just take, for example, the current D.C. Attorney General, Brian Schwalb. He has now filed 2 lawsuits against the administration after President Trump began this crime crackdown. In fact, the D.C. Attorney General just filed a new motion in one of those cases late last night. So all of these bills in this markup today, they run the gamut, everything from bail to changing policies of juveniles to even DC's own Attorney General.
And Zach, there are a lot of changes in these bills. You highlighted a few because if the DA is picked by the president, we can expect a lot less opposition. But it would derail pretrial detention standards, sentencing, and transferring juvenile suspects. What are the most controversial provisions in these proposals from a civil liberties perspective?
You know, I think one issue that has come up both here in D.C., but also you're seeing it play out, for example, even in Charlotte, where especially after the recent attack there, it's come up again, is this issue of cashless bail and some of these policies that blue cities have implemented across the country. Of course, President Trump and Republicans have really been taking aim at it. And of course, it's D.C. where they have this greater authority, as compared to some of these other states and cities where Congress can't so easily just walk in and change the laws themselves. in these local jurisdictions. But of course, in D.C., they do have this authority. So this is really Congress's opportunity to try to get involved if they want to, and essentially play the role of what is now played by the city council in implementing some of these policies. Now, in terms of some of the other ones, another big issue that we've seen come up is how to handle juveniles. We've seen a lot of criticism from U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro saying that she can't prosecute certain juveniles for crimes, and that's going to be some of the proposals on the table today, changing the rules that would make it easier to prosecute some of these juveniles and young adults more easily.
And one of the reasons she raised that is because statistics show a number of these car break-ins and some of these crimes are being committed by those who are underage and therefore able to obfuscate judgment that those who are older would face. But what's the message from the efforts of supporters, Zach?
The message here, I think you see it when President Trump walked out and tried to go to a D.C. restaurant near the White House last night, is they believe that the city, in their words, has changed. And after these federal troops have now been deployed for about 30 days. And they believe, even if this MPD takeover goes away, as Tom was just going through, that these federal troops are going to remain potentially for many months. So President Trump, certainly the message that the White House is now trying to send is that essentially crime is starting to get under control in D.C. And that's why you see President Trump, who, during his first term in the White House, never visited the D.C. restaurant other than his own hotel when it was here. I'm finally making this step of visiting a restaurant, even if it's just a few blocks away from the White House. So that's certainly the message they are trying to send, is that they believe they're getting crime under control.
However, Zach, I will say that particular restaurant has the best key lime pie, and you know what I'm talking about. Zach Schoenfeld, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Good to be with you.
Russia's war in Ukraine comes far too close for comfort for a key NATO ally. Russian drones flying into Polish airspace. Could the incursion signal an escalating threat that could expand the war on NATO's fringes? And chaos breaks out at a Florida Walmart. A man swinging a machete at officers. How they were able to get the situation under control.